A big thanks to our sponsors, Friday Pulse, for their support of this episode. We've got their CEO, Nick Marks, on to share a little bit about them.
Yeah, Friday Pulse is a measure of the happiness of your organisations. And we are launching a campaign called First Measure Free, which is you can have your first measure of the happiness of your teams for free. And that will give you lots of great reporting on what's going on at that level. So you can decide what you want to do next.
And just say that you heard about them through the podcast so Nick can take me out for dinner when you become a client.
Absolutely do.
It's been a shaky time for the employee-employer relationship. We ran from the pandemic to the Great Resignation to wave after wave of redundancies. Some say that the social contract is broken, but that's not what I see. The concept of a career for life may be well and truly gone, which is no bad thing in my opinion, but it's been replaced by a demand to support employees through whatever stage of life they're in whilst they're employed by your business. Whether they're new parents, caring for family members, whether they're ill or thinking about retirement, everyone needs radically different benefits. The matrix of potential support and perks could be never ending, but getting it right feels more important today than ever because we're surrounded by increasing uncertainty, worsening public services, and a depressing level of trust in leadership. That's why I'm thrilled that Amanda Moore is joining us today. Amanda led the hugely innovative reward and perks team at Gymshark, where she supported the business through a meteoric global expansion, which was accompanied by a corresponding increase in benefit complexity. Amanda, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Felix. What an introduction.
Yeah, well, we like to do the big questions on We Need to Talk About HR. So let's jump into the really interesting, meaty stuff. Why are benefits important?
What a huge question. I feel like benefits is the part of HR which is so important, so proactive, and can have like a huge impact on people, but also people and organisations, which is why I think I've got the great privilege of working in that field. So yeah, why benefits? I think for so long people were just used to focus on pay, and although that's still so important, I'm sure we'll come on to talk about it today. I think benefits can really have a personalised experience for organisations and the way they treat their people, and a bit like what you talked about in the intro, how they show up for people in the different circumstances throughout their career and their lifetime.
And no, I think that's so interesting. I feel like benefits done right show that companies really give a shit and care, but benefits done wrong, I feel it's not that it does the opposite, but maybe they can become really transactional. I think one of the things that I speak to, and a lot of my listeners on the show are sort of HR leaders at smaller businesses. I think that pressure to get it right, combined with the immense scale of what personalization would look like, can feel really, really daunting. I was wondering if you have any thoughts. I mean, Gymshark, you must have been on a journey from when they were a relatively small business to the sort of giant success story that they are now. But I wonder whether do you think that benefits are important, differently important at different stages of a company's growth, or are they always important in the same way?
I think they're always important, but for different reasons. So I think if you think back to the early Gymshark days, so I joined the business in 2018. The business was, in its infancy. There wasn't a huge amount of benefits on offer for the people that when I joined the business, and kind of my responsibilities and part of my role was what we call scaling up. So scaling up the pay and benefits proposition and making sure we could attract some of the best talent across the world to work with Gymshark. And ultimately that's what we did. So I think the benefits proposition was so important in those early days because it's chicken and egg, right? You want the best people to work for you because you want to be the best. But how can you get the best people to work for you because when you want to be the best, if you haven't got the best proposition? And sometimes companies will say, well, I can't afford that proposition because we're not the best yet. But which one comes first, the best people or the best benefits offered to get the best people? So I think that's where it becomes really challenging. And I think if you can fast forward like 5 years later.
Actually, before you fast forward, what do you think is the answer to that one?
I think you've got to do benefits first. I think otherwise you end up recruiting a lot of people. Well, no, okay, you've got to know what's coming for your benefits offer. So we recruited a lot of people on trust, but they knew they were joining us because X, Y, Z was coming. Whereas you can't say to your people that you're going to recruit from the big players that you're gonna one day have a great benefits proposition if you don't really know what that looks like and what's coming. So we had a roadmap of what was coming. It was just going to take us time to get there. I think if you try and recruit the best people and don't know what that's even going to look like from a benefits perspective, you end up really overpaid on pay to overcompensate for that.
That's so interesting. And I haven't heard of a benefits roadmap, for example, in the future. So what were the sort of things that you wanted to be able to provide, that what was important to be on that roadmap? I guess it'd be really interesting to see what's a small company, an aspiring company benefit versus a we've made it, this is what it's going to look like benefit.
Yeah, I think there's loads of different things you can do. I think there's no one size fits all for everybody. I think you've got to design that roadmap that best suits you, your organisation, your values, the direction you're going in. But what we did at Gymshark really early on was we did like a gap analysis. So we said, what do we want to offer? Where do we want to be? How do we want to be seen by our future employees and our current employees? And where are we now? And what's that gap? And how are we going to close that gap from a resource perspective, from a time perspective? And that's how we then built our roadmap.
That's really cool.
I think if you're then a small company, you might prioritise the benefits that are really meaningful for your people in the here and now, but don't cost you a fortune. And there's some really creative things you can do that make you different and stand out, where you haven't always got to have millions of pounds benefits budget.
And that's amazing. Like sometimes just showing that you're doing it to show that you care and that it's important to the people that you work with is so important. What are some of the? I'd love to hear some of the ideas that you've had and implemented in the past, or that you've heard other businesses do that I guess sit in that relatively, I suppose, low cost feels a bit transactional, but they're sort of easy to implement, not sort of cost the earth benefits that, yeah, they're creative and they make a big difference.
I think some of the benefits where you offer things like family leave as an example. I think people think to be, gold star, 5-star on your family leave policy, it needs to be a significantly paid leave, fully paid leave element to it. And that does make you stand out. But I recognise that also costs people and organisations a lot of money. But I think there's things you can do around that policy that don't cost a fortune, that create better experiences for people. So, you've got one end of the spectrum where you've got a fully paid family leave policy, which is great financially, but no support mechanism, no community, no return to work coaching. The way your manager treats you when you're on leave doesn't make you feel great and causes all sorts of problems. Or you've got the other end of the spectrum where a company may only offer statutory pay, but the experiences around that are amazing. And you end up doing that family leave and speaking really highly of that organisation. And obviously, to be the best of the best, you need to get both right. But the second element, the support mechanisms, return to work coaching, how you onboard and offboard your people when they go on family leave, don't always cost a fortune, but can be so powerful in the benefit.
It's so interesting because I've seen through experience of friends and family, particularly around that parental leave piece, amazing amounts of, so for example, the other end of the thing, so like loads of pay, off for ages, complete, I guess, HR flexibility around it, and then the whole thing loses all of its value when a manager bungles the I've seen bungling the promotion, bungling conversations around like when someone's coming back. Oh, you couldn't come back like a month early, could you? Like over egging the state, keeping in touch days, not having the keeping in touch days. There are so many things that can go wrong.
Yeah.
How do you control that at a central level?
I'm thinking about education. I think sometimes, and the thing that I learned the most when I went on my own family leave experience is sometimes you've got to live it to know what good looks like for you. And if your manager has never lived it, they might not even know. They might not even think of the things that some people would think about. So I think it's about education and upskill. I also think this is where community is really important. So, you know, can you buddy up leaders who have had people that go on family leave to share experiences, best practice, to be there for each other, because it's difficult for them as well. They're going through different changes and transitions, and the fact that they've not got somebody in their team for a period of time, and they're going to come back, and they've got to remember to keep in touch with them, and you know, that out of sight, out of mind can sometimes kick in. But at the same time, like the people going on leave, like have they got buddies? Have they got people that they can connect with in the business to help each other as well go through that transition and that journey? So I think it's about education, upskill, and community, really.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So we got a little sidetracked, and I want to come back to this piece around sort of the right benefit at the right time in someone's life, because I know it's something you're really passionate about. But before we do, I think you were talking about the core elements, maybe the MVP elements for benefits. So if you put parental leave in there, what are the other, I guess, the cornerstones of you've got to have these, or else, you know, what are you doing?
I think it also comes down to the demographics of your business. So, like in menopause, and how we offer and support people going through that, you know, that moment of their life and dealing with that alongside their career is so important. But if that's not the demographic of your business, I wouldn't prioritize it on your benefit roadmap. So I think it depends on your demographic. I think, you know, some things that I've seen really popular past are around like health assessments and getting people to proactively look after their health. There's some really cool stuff about the boring topic of pensions that you can do that can have huge impact, and they can be forgotten because it is the boring topic of pensions. So, you know, I think it's about understanding the people that you've got in your business, the people that you want to have in your business, and then trying to design a benefits proposition that's relevant and important for them.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And again, you hit on something that's in pensions, you hit on something that it is, like, I think to most people it is really boring, but it's so important. And I almost feel like it's fallen into a kind of pastoral care that businesses have over their teams, in that tends to be younger employees tend not to really care about, or not really think about pension or anything like that. But I do think it kind of falls into that sort of, let's look after, yes, we don't have you for life here, but let's see what we can do to keep adding value to you. And even if you don't value the pension contribution, trust us, it's sort of really important. I think that's been a really interesting, because obviously it got made mandatory, but I think that's been a really interesting shift. Actually, we were so lucky. We happened to have someone in the business. I'll name drop him, Robin, who's one of our client services directors. And for some reason, he was just really into pensions.
Love it. He can
And
be
he,
my best friend.
yeah, but he took it on board. He's sort of become Mr. Pensions in the business. He launched our pensions program. He really took it, and I think sometimes it just takes someone who, brings a benefit like that to life, like a real champion in the business.
Yeah.
Do you actively seek those people out sometimes, or does it just happen by chance like we had?
It does. No, I think authenticity tends to happen by chance, but you do need them. And I always talk to the team about like who are the people going to be flying the flags for us, because I'm sure we can be loud if we need to, but we're not really that loud enough. So you can find those people through interest. So they'll be the ones that tend to ask the questions the most about, and it's obviously a topic that's interesting to them for whatever reason. So how do you build relationships with those people to help them be more knowledgeable, to help them fly the flag for you? And I think that's when case studies can come to life and be really powerful when it comes to communication, because it's authentic, it's a real life example, and it can then mean something, usually for somebody else. Sorry. So yeah, it can then mean something for somebody else.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I completely agree in that. The sort of power of those flag wavers, flag bearers. Yeah, whatever.
Yeah, what would they?
Whatever
Yeah,
that
what
word
would they
is.
be called? To fly
So
the flag.
yeah, there we go. So I suppose we've sort of indirectly spoken about retirement through pensions. We've spoken about parental leave. What are there other sort of phases of life that maybe go, and sorry, you mentioned the menopause as well, which is, I suppose, always been very important, but definitely a sort of hot topic at the minute. But are there any other sort of key phases of life that you'd recommend HR practitioners or reward specialists sort of focusing on?
I always come back to like, what are the most stressful points in people's lives? So it's usually getting married and divorced, having a baby, moving house, or buying a house for the first time maybe, or going through some form of health crisis, or losing a loved one, whether that's a family member or a friend. So I think like if they are the most stressful moments of people's lives, and in some times they're even good news, like having a baby or getting married or hope or moving house, how like they're still stressful. So how do you show up as an organisation to really help people through those moments? And I think if you can kind of think of it as like moments, you can then think of it as like, what benefits could we then offer related to those moments? So if you do have a young demographic organisation where they maybe are thinking about saving for a home or getting on the property ladder, or maybe then actually like most of your people are renting, there's like great things you can do to support those people that you wouldn't maybe have in an organisation where you don't have that portfolio business. There's a different demographic in your business. So like some companies in the past will loan people their deposit for their rental, because if you're in rented accommodation, you don't always get your deposit back until you've moved out, but you need to pay your deposit for your next accommodation before you've moved in. So there's like a lag where if people haven't got savings, which we know the majority of the population haven't, how can they afford to get out of rental A to move into rental B? And then people can feel financially trapped, and that can cause all sorts of mental health impacts and stress. So, some companies will do that loan arrangement so that they get an interest-free loan, doesn't cause too much drama. It really helps those people. And those are like the moments where it really shows up that your organisation is supporting your people because it's meaningful to them.
And I guess when we're going into meaning, I sort of mentioned the social contract at the beginning. I guess maybe that's where you make the case for ROI around benefits. Is that what you're looking at? Sort of retention, productivity? Is that how you justify the additional cost?
Yeah, I think ROI in the benefits and wellbeing space is really challenging, and I've not yet met a reward professional who has nailed it, because I think some of it's down to like feel and gut. It is about what your engagement survey said, and it is about the retention statistics you have and the time to hire stats you've got, and your absence levels and all those things. But it's also about like, what's the general vibe in your business? Like, do people just seem like they really want to be here? And do the feedback that you get when you show up in those different moments, is it really positive? Because you tend to find that people end up speaking up quite vocally when they're unhappy or really happy. So if you're not hearing from people, things are probably okay. But if you're hearing from people because they're unhappy, then you need to do something about it. And if you're hearing from people because they're really happy, then those are the success moments. And that's like your qualitative feedback, which should play through into the quantitative statistic, but doesn't always.
Absolutely. Well, hopefully you listened to it, Amanda. But 2 weeks ago, I had Nick Marks on. He's called the happiness expert, or self-titled, but his whole business is called Friday Pulse. Is all around measuring happiness within the organization. And he said those people who are okay, that's the killer to a business, in that you'll never hear from them. They'll be performing, the productivity and their engagement will be pretty closely correlated to how happy they're feeling, but you're only getting 80% of what you could be getting from them. So I think that's really interesting when you're looking at benefits, is how can we tap into that extra 25-30% of their discretionary effort that you only really get when someone feels like they really belong and they're really aligned to the organization. So it's super interesting.
And I think we get that when that personalization kicks in, and as benefits offer is different, it's meaningful, it feels like really powerful to me and not just generic. And I'm getting more than just a salary and maybe a PMI cover and a auto enrollment pension scheme.
Well, now we're getting into a topic that I do not. Well, I don't know a lot of answers, but this is one that baffles me. And I would imagine when you don't have a sort of a specialist reward, when you're not lucky enough to have someone in a specialist reward position, would probably baffle a number of HR leaders. You and I have spoken about 7 different stages of life, roughly. We've also spoken about I don't know, 5 of the, 15 different core kinds of benefits you could offer people. And we've spoken about the different benefits being interesting in different ways to people of different ages. We haven't come on to them to sort of ethnic background. We haven't we haven't spoken about any of the other protected characteristics, all of which I would imagine has an impact on statistically on which benefits are likely to be useful to people at different phases of their life based on who they are and who they're surrounded by. That just gets super complex. Even that sentence was overly complex. How on earth do you create something that's truly personalized for that many different variables?
I think that's where your roadmap comes in, and you've got to start somewhere. So I think if you keep thinking of utopia, you're just going to be overwhelmed, and you're just going to be like, okay, we've not got the time, we've not got the resources, and if you're a small business, we've not got the knowledge. So you've just got to pause, reflect, and think, okay, where are we going to start? And start making an impact there, and then build on that journey. If at Gymshark in 2018 we'd have thought about utopia, we'd have been too terrified to get going. And we'd have never built the benefits package that we did. But we've just made a start. And there were some unhappy people because the start wasn't meaningful for them. But we knew we were starting for the majority. We knew the offer that we were creating was going to make the majority of people happy. And we were then building on it from there. And I think if you haven't got the knowledge and the expertise in your business, and that's where, there is interim reward people out there who, will come and work for you in your business for a short period of time to get you started, either to mentor your existing HR team, to help build knowledge if they've got an interest and some capacity. There's loads of solutions that you can think of to get going. It's about just getting started.
Just putting one foot in front of the other. I'd love to hear about this. What did it look like what does it look like at a fully fledged or pretty mature benefits function? What does it look like at a Gymshark when you left, or an OVO when you've joined? How complex does it get? What are the cool bells and whistles that I can't even imagine?
I think it can get really complex. And when you come to communicate with people, like, it's got to show up in so many different ways about the experience. So even somebody like me who lives and breathes this every day, like it's my bread and butter, I've still felt overwhelmed at times and been like, sorry, have we got that benefit? What's that called again? How do I find that?
Wow.
So I think, you get to a point where you have so much available to people that they might not even know about it. So that's where I think the communication, the case study, and what I called like an always-on communication plan is really important, because you can show up multiple times in different ways to people. And this is where you then gets really detailed, but then you start embedding in your employee experience. So let's go back to the moving house one, for example. If we know somebody's moving house, one of the things that they might do is change their address on your HR system.
Mm-hmm.
Is there an automatic email come out of that HR system connecting the fact that they've moved house to some of the benefits that you offer? So did you know that you could get discount at Currys to buy your new dishwasher through this benefit platform? Did you know? So I think that's where it gets really detailed. Automated, so it takes time to get set up, but doesn't mean that somebody in your people team is manually sending out that email when somebody moves address. But when there is so much available, you've got to keep communicating and talking to people about it all the time in different ways to keep it alive.
It's so hard. I mean, I just think about the discounts that I would get through. I think I get a bunch of discounts through my gym membership, and I get a bunch of different discounts through my bank, and I get a bunch of discounts and support from work. And you're right, there's so much lost opportunity out there just through
Yeah.
lack of knowledge, lack of being in the moment. So I really get how having those regular check-ins with people makes the
And
world of difference.
how often do you use those discounts that are available to you for your gym or your bank? Because the experience maybe not be simple,
Yeah.
or it's too many clicks. Oh, I can't bother to go and get that voucher ordered because it's going to take me 10 minutes and I'm only going to save £7. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's about how easy do you make it for people as well. I've been talking to the team recently about like to get to our benefit system, because we've got a benefit system which is like our one-stop shop with everything available for our people. If you go onto our internet, how many clicks does it take to even get to the benefit system in the first place? I'm trying to make it really easy for people and reducing that clicks and reducing that time. So, you're removing those barriers to access.
That's really, really interesting. I'm aware of time. I really want to talk about pay transparency. Big sort of topic at the moment. A lot of people talking about, how extreme do you go on sharing what pay is? Is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? What do you think?
I think it's a bit like Marmite. I think people either love it or they're absolutely hating it. And there's all sorts of reasons as to why that could be, but I do think I'm seeing like two ends of the spectrum at the moment, where people are like all for it and running with it, and people that are just like, oh, this is going to cause us so many problems.
And when you say people love it, are you talking about business leadership, rewards, or the team members in the business?
Team members and like leaders within the business as well, and like even team members in organizations where they're really well paid, like it's creating like nervousness for them, because even as an individual, not everybody's transparent about their salary with friends and family.
Yeah.
Never mind work colleagues and random people.
Yeah, and the funny thing is like, if it's out there, people are going to look it up, right?
Yeah. So the conversation I've had recently is around like job adverts. So most, not all, some organisations are starting to put salaries on job adverts. This is creating so much progress when it comes to gender pay gap. There's so much theory out there around the difference between negotiation of certain demographics. So we can see it starting to have an impact in that space. However, people are starting to get nervous, because then they know if you can then go and look up somebody's job advert that they've applied for and potentially see the salary range and potentially know a sort of rough idea of what that person's paid. And that creates nervousness of people. That creates nervousness for leaders who struggle sometimes to justify or articulate why somebody would be paid that amount of money. It creates nervousness for individuals if they don't want people to know what they earn. And some businesses are starting to worry because they don't have the right pay frameworks and philosophy and processes in place to even do this pay transparency journey in the first place.
I mean, the scale of arbitrary pay in some of the companies that I've heard of, obviously I'm not talking about any of our clients here because they all have their house in order, but I've heard of businesses where people are paid, people who happen to join during that 2021 2022 boost were paid 30% more than the top of the band, and then it went down again, and people who joined afterwards are paid 30% less again. And it's just, the thing I like about salary transparency is that, and we do publish the salaries on the jobs that we post at Instant Impact, is it just means you have to have your house in order.
Yeah.
And I think there's a real benefit there. And yes, it will be painful, but as with a lot of these things, it's only going to be, it will be just as painful in 3 years' time, when it might well be made the legal requirement to do it. and it will probably be slightly more painful then than it is now. So I definitely think that I think it's a really positive step, just for all the reasons you said. I think pay gap is it's just a reason in itself. So
Yeah. And we've seen it be legislation in some states in the US already,
yeah,
and to be confirmed on what will happen in the UK. But I personally, same as you, think it's only going in one direction. And I think the call out then to our reward leaders and our HR leaders is try and get ahead of the game, because otherwise it's going to come quickly, come around the corner really quickly, and we're not going to be ready for it. And I think pay transparency, people think, again, like, it's not black and white, it's not here or there. It doesn't mean you've got to share everything with everybody. So I think it's about taking that reflection, taking that step back and deciding, okay, what do we want to share with who? And I'm quite a visual person, so I see it as like a matrix. So all your stakeholders are on the top, and all your different elements of pay and like the pay processes are along the side, and like what are you then going to share with who and into what level of depth and detail. And it should be really like clear about your decision and why you've made that decision, so that and understanding what your pay policies are, understanding what your pay processes are, so that when you come to defend the differences in people's salary made because of a 2021 peak, that this person's paid more for these reasons. But also, when you then need to do something about it, and you need to, as businesses, need to start budgeting, and doing some financial planning to close those pay gaps where you have got them.
Yeah, no, that sounds really sensible. I'm a little aware of the time. I do want to ask, are you seeing? I'd love to understand sort of the trends that you've seen in the reward space. Are there any sort of benefits or focuses that you think are going to be, well, I guess either particularly important right now or are going to become more important over the next 6 months, couple of years?
I think obviously we talked about pay transparency being one. I think that will be a hot topic. I think how organisations are supporting their people with menopause, fertility. We're seeing like growing trends in that space there as well. We keep talking about the Great Resignation and people just being productive and not being, people just being, we keep seeing people being present and not being productive and talking about that. And I think we're always going to see and hear of these trends that are happening. But I think it's making sure that as a leader, you only focus on them if they're relevant for your business, because I think it can quite easily be quite distracting. Oh, what's the next big thing that we need to be adding to our strategy and spending all our time and energy on, when some organisations haven't even got the basics right. They're not even, back to family lead as the earlier conversation, they're not even making sure they've got the right experiences around some of the standard stuff that we have to offer within the business. So I think it's quite easy to get excited about the next shiny and new thing, but actually keep focused on what your business needs first and do that really well.
That's great advice, especially for a complete magpie like myself. So I think that's really important. And I think the other, like the huge takeaway the biggest takeaway I've come away from today is just don't get overwhelmed by the sheer complexity of what could exist. Actually, just putting one foot in front of the other is the way to go about it, and accept that Rome won't be built in a day, but better to start laying bricks now. You'll never get there.
And celebrate your success and your progress on the way as well. Don't forget to pause, look back and see all the good stuff that you've done, because even if you don't feel like your organisation offers any benefit at all, you will be. You'll be doing it. You'll be supporting your people in ways that's still meaningful to them in some way, and it's about celebrating that and recognising that.
Fantastic. Well, Amanda, thank you so much for joining. It was a really, really interesting conversation. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.